Hey, welcome back to Embodied Philosophies Conference. My name is Adrianna Limbach. It's good to be here with you guys today. I hope that you've been enjoying the conference so far, collecting lots of little gems and pearls along the way. So for today, I wanted to open up just by taking a moment to sit together. So just taking 3 or 4 minutes to collect ourselves wherever we happen to be. I know that collectively we're scattered across the world, so using this as an opportunity just to come into the same room and find our bearings. So wherever you happen to be, just finding a sustainable upright seat, and perhaps even letting your eyes gently shut. And taking a moment just to connect to the body. Noticing where the body makes contact. And taking a moment to connect to the breath. And we'll take just a minute or two here together to relax into the breath. Again, find our bearings, our vantage point here in space. Maybe noticing any residual velocity or mood that you're bringing in. And if at any point we find ourselves distracted or wandering, no big deal. And just coming back to the breath. Allowing our minds to stabilize a bit. And then shifting our attention just a bit, connecting to our intention for being here. And what it is that prompted you to attend this conference. And perhaps that initial motivation or intention, and why you said yes, made the effort. Giving ourselves a bit of a mental anchor as we continue to ease into the day. And then just allowing that motivation to slide into the backdrop a little bit, coming back to the breath, and taking a few more moments just to relax here. And then coming back in whenever you're ready at your own pace. Just letting practice dissolve. Great. Thank you guys for that. So, desire as a path of practice. True transparency, as I was on my way here to record this particular talk, I was on the train and checking my emails that had come through. And one of the emails was from The Gap, the clothing store, which I recently purchased something from. So I think I must have gotten onboarded onto their list just by default. And the heading, the tagline was, you know that feeling when you wear something that's brand new? And I thought, ooh, yeah, I know that feeling. I like that feeling. I want that feeling. I want to wear something brand new. I'm wearing this dress that I've had for like 6 years that I bought at a thrift store. I want something brand new. I love that feeling. And it struck me how often I have that thought of I want that feeling. I want to have that experience. I want. So as kind of a preface for this talk, I know that the entire conference is built around the umbrella of how do we take these philosophies from Buddhist theory and apply them into our everyday life. And as I was thinking about the topic, it came to mind how prevalent that really is, that feeling of I want, how we probably generally have that thought or that feeling hundreds of times a day, if not thousands, of I want. And how it really, desire is kind of built into our makeup. It's built into the thread of who we are, that it's one of the most persistent and prevalent thoughts that we have as we move through our day. So as we talk about applying philosophy, what better way than to take something that is just so ubiquitous, this feeling of I want, this feeling of desire. So that initial warm-up, that meditation, just getting in touch with what it is that brought us here, why we decided to show up. And I don't know for sure, but I would put chips on the table to say it's probably because you wanted something. You wanted to have some sort of experience, or you wanted to learn something. And going back to traditional Buddhist texts, the Buddha himself said that all dhammas are rooted in desire, that all phenomenon is rooted in desire, all action is rooted in desire, that we would not be here right now. I would not be giving this talk. You would not be participating in the conference. This conference would not have happened as a whole were it not for some desire, some motivation, some want. So this wanting. I think about my own personal experience of what it is that brought me to study Buddhism in the first place. And it was back in high school. And I was a freshman in high school, and I was walking down the hall, and there was a sort of crazy professor type, this teacher who only taught the junior classes. And he was sort of disheveled and mumbling to himself, and he was kind of curmudgeonly, and I've always really liked that in a teacher. And I thought, I really want to take a class with him. I don't know what he teaches, but I just really want to be around him. He's sort of weird and wonderful and snarly. And so when I was a junior, looking through the class catalog, I realized that the only class he was taking, or the only class that he was teaching rather, was Eastern philosophy. So I thought, okay, I want to take his class, and so I will take this Eastern philosophy class. And what ended up happening is that the discourses on the Heart Sutra in this Eastern philosophy class just blew me wide open. It just really shook up my worldview. And everything that I had sort of presumed or thought was important, everything that I was sort of operating under, these notions or these mythologies that I was carrying. And my feeling was, I'm terrified by this, but I sort of want to know why I'm so scared by it. It was kind of that feeling of if you've ever been with a kid in the woods and they find a dead animal, and sort of poking at it, where it's like very unfamiliar and also incredibly familiar, and there seems to be some truth to it. It was that feeling of, I want to know more about this. So I began studying and traveled to Asia after high school, etc., came to New York. New York City happened, as New York does, completely fell out of my practice, and then came back to it in my mid-20s when there was, again, that reignited desire, that want of, I am stressed out, I am overwhelmed, I have a very fancy liberal arts degree and no idea what I want to do with my life. Meditation was helpful. How about I try that again? So I consider my own path and what it is that brought me here, and it was always sparked and ignited by a desire. All Dhammas are rooted in desire. We wouldn't be here were it not for desire. And yet, with Buddhist philosophy, desire gets a little bit tricky. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Four Noble Truths, at first glance can sort of look like a cautionary tale against desire. That desire is really the root of all of our suffering. And best case scenario, it is the biggest obstacle that we have to work with in order to find any amount of happiness, liberation, peace in our lives. So, first truth of the Four Noble Truths is that suffering exists. Dukkha is the Sanskrit name. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering. We can also look at this as being dissatisfaction or stress, which I think sort of takes the sting out of it. So stress, dissatisfaction, suffering, it's all pervasive. It exists. And the way that the Buddha boiled it down was to break it into 3 parts. I think one of the glorious things about Buddhist philosophy is that it is so neatly organized into lists and bullet points. So if you have any amount of pragmatic left brain leaning, it's really nice to have these categories. So the very first form of suffering, or the way that we experience this discontent, is the dukkha of dukkha, the suffering of suffering, which is just our general everyday pain, either mental or physical. We stub our toe, we get sick, we get a gnarly bug bite and it itches all night. So it's just this kind of everyday run-of-the-mill pain that we experience. We can look at it and say pretty clearly, yep, that is not pleasant, that is discontent, and that is suffering. So he gets into more of the subtle forms of this in the next 2. The second being the all-pervasive dukkha, or the all-pervasive discontent. And it's just this feeling, it's usually pretty ephemeral. We can't really put our finger on it, but this feeling of my experience is just not living up to my expectations. I wish it were slightly different. And if you've ever had this experience in meditation practice of just wishing like, I just don't really want to be here. Maybe I can plan my vacation, or I can respond to my emails in my mind, or maybe I'll jump over here and think about that. It's just this feeling of, this is just not living up to my expectations. I wish it were slightly different. I wish I were just somewhere other than I am right now. And then the third form of suffering, and I think this is where it gets really interesting, particularly on the topic of desire, is what we usually equate to happiness. What it is that we tend to be moving towards or chasing or rearranging our experience in order to get, which is the arising of pleasant mental and physical sensations. So the Buddha says this is actually a form of suffering if you're experiencing something that is pleasant. Which sounds a little counterintuitive, but the reason why is because it's going to disappear. it's bound to change, and it's not going to last. So here we are spending all of this time and all of this energy trying to rearrange our circumstances and plan and strategize and manipulate in various ways, both explicit and subtle, to have the experience that we want to be having. And the Buddha says, this is actually what gives rise to suffering. Because A, it's exhausting, and B, the truth of impermanence. It's going to change. Best case scenario, you get what you want, and it's either not going to be the specific flavor that you want it to be in, or even if it is, it's not going to stick around. So this is kind of a bummer, I think, when we consider desire. Because, all right, all dhammas are rooted in desire. Desire is what inspires and motivates any action. It's what inspires and motivates our movement in the world. And yet, it is implicitly dissatisfactory. It isn't going to bring us anything that is lasting and sustainable in terms of happiness or joy. So, not leaving us there, the Buddha then said, second noble truth, there's a reason for it. So this is, I think, the good news, because he doesn't just leave us with an open wound. He says, all right, well, there's a cause, there's a reason why this is happening. So second noble truth, again, breaks it down into these beautifully bullet-pointed lists. The first reason why we experience these various forms of dissatisfaction is because of aversion. So the first of the three root poisons, aversion, which is I am not having the experience that I want to be having, and I am going to struggle against it tooth and nail. So this is usually where we find the aggression side of things. It's where we find the stress side of things, of my desire is not getting what it wants. This is not what I ordered. This is not what was on the menu. And so we fight against it. We struggle against it in this ever-perpetuating quest to have the experience that we want to be having, for our desire to be fulfilled. So that's where suffering comes from. The second of the second noble truths is attraction. So second of the root poisons, attraction, which is, again, that desire. I am going to do everything in my power, in both subtle and explicit ways, to get what I want. Desire wants to get its way all the time. And then when it doesn't, again, we slip back into aversion. Desire does not get what it wants. And then the third is ignorance. The third of these root poisons, or the causes for our suffering, our discontent, is ignorance. We have no idea how this operates. We've never really explored how this works and how this functions in a day-to-day way in our lives. And we just sort of walk through the world volleying back and forth between these two polarities of, yes, delicious, I want, yum, more, and gross, disgusting, I hate, I fear, go away. And we're constantly just being jostled between these two polarities without recognizing how this functions, how this works, and how it's actually causing us a whole lot of discontent, even when we think we're getting what we want.